Let me start my talk with a bold claim. Many of us will die stroking a machine and being stroked by it. The prediction of this caliber undoubtedly cause some inner jolt in most people. That machines appear at the end of our life doesn't imply in principle greater astonishment than their presence throughout the other moments of its human biography. However, the attribution of such a genuinely personal manifestation as compassion and affection expressed through caresses to a machine in a moment as singular as death raises in all its radicalism many questions on the specificity of the human being, on the specificity of artificial devices, and on the type of relationships that may occur between the two. And now, we can all affirm that machines are produced to assist humans in their biological, cultural, and why not, spiritual development. In the case of the machines that we include under the label of artificial intelligence, AI, we could add the nuance that the AI created and developed by natural intelligence helps the latter in carrying out a multitude of processes: productive, curative, evaluative, cognitive, with a specific purpose. I have intentionally added the term cognitive in the previous list because deep learning techniques can show hidden patterns in the most successful problem-solving strategies that would otherwise remain unknown to humans. As a program, artificial intelligence aims to build machines that think or act in a human or rational way. I will not dwell along these lines on the distinction between weak and strong AI, on the practical problem of how to find out with certainty that a machine is working in a human mode, just think of the Turing test and variants of this, or on whether it even makes sense to perform said distinction. I would rather dedicate the available space to delve into the relationship and difference between natural and artificial applied to intelligence. In what sense the AI program violates the very concept of AI, and how a healthy relationship between human beings and artificial intelligence can help the former to regain the value of nature and to recognize themselves as a mystery given to themselves. Now, the unstoppable rise of technology makes it increasingly difficult to establish clear boundaries between what must count as natural or artificial. It seems that we can modify or increase the natural dimension of reality almost at will, although the collateral effects can be truly worrisome. In a way, one could reason, if the human being is the fruit of nature, what the former does with the latter will also be. If the activities of natural entities, inert of living, cannot cease to be natural, why should human activities and productions cease to be? We immediately realized that this way of posing the question hides a supposed opposition between natural and artificial as a criterion of distinction. However, what is artificial is not simply opposed to what is natural. The former may determine the latter, at least in theory, more and better. Now, this fake dialogue between God and Nietzsche that I found on the net, but haven't been able to recover, may serve as an illustration for what I mean. Nietzsche says to God, "I'm also capable of creating man." God responds, "Go ahead." Nietzsche then asks God, "Give me a little mud." But God exclaims, "The mud is mine." The moral, at least for me, is that the artificial world is not created out of nothing. It is based on something already given and takes advantage of its potential to build a novelty for specific purposes. This last idea gives us a clue to deepen the relationship and distinction between natural and artificial. Sure enough, nature is capable of novelty, as the entire evolutionary history reveals. Nature itself is creative insofar as its dynamics generate from existing events new possibilities that will eventually become future realities. The evolution of the universe towards greater local complexity is made possible by the extremely low initial entropy of the Big Bang. As pointed out by the second law of thermodynamics, this is, by the way, the past hypothesis. It explains the emergence of the second law of thermodynamics. On the contrary, what does it mean to build or produce something by a human being from previous material? It means precisely subtracting a portion of the universe from the global directionality of evolution to dedicate it to specific purposes, which have to do with human interests or ends. From cutting down trees with power saws to all the machinery that involves animal exploitation for human consumption. The idea that I want to emphasize is that, on the one hand, what is artificial continues to depend on what is natural, even if only for the mere fact that today we still need to start from elementary particles, such as the initial mud, to produce whatever artifact. In this sense, what is artificial continues to participate in the mystery of the existence of nature as given. But on the other hand, artificial systems are selected by the human being, not simply by natural selection as occurs in evolutionary dynamics. Remarkably, the term natural selection was initially employed for the sake of its analogy with human selection when crossing species or races of animals and plants. In my opinion, there is an insurmountable gap between the two selections. Human selection is always carried out for particular purposes and therefore is guided by concrete reasons. On the contrary, natural selection is the result of the evolutionary movement intrinsic to nature itself. The above reflections allow us incidentally to better understand the peculiarity of human beings and their activity in nature. What is peculiar about the human being is his or her capacity for immaterial knowledge. It is this capacity that allows for all technical developments and the entire field that we call AI. Immaterial knowledge, which begins with abstraction, enables the focus on particular aspects and dynamics of nature to make accurate judgments, sometimes after much effort, as the vicissitudes of scientific knowledge show, about future behaviors of natural reality. The immateriality of intellectual knowledge allows us to get out of the dangerous circle of trial and error that characterizes finally successful adaptations based on random genetic mutations. Human beings can plan the future and adapt partially the world around them. We can somehow transform part of nature into smart devices that serve our needs. One may thus say that technique, is not so much a counterpoint to nature as a vast culmination of it. The human being is part of nature and the vertex of natural evolution. In the human being, the evolution and directionality of the universe, though depending on physics and biology, reach a new dimension thanks to the cognitive takeoff that immaterial knowledge enables. In this last evolutionary step, human freedom and responsibility are crucial, so that technique doesn't oppose nature, but continues to develop and complete it. Human beings' uniqueness is inseparable from their vocation as guardians and cultivators of nature from which they stem. But a human being's intellectual skill is neither absolute nor is it ever perfectly exercised. Humans cannot encompass, through a single intuition, the natural dynamism that remains a mystery for them. Human beings experience themselves as given, as nature. They can partially know the natural dynamics and benefit from that knowledge to improve in particular and specific directions the upshot of biological evolution. They can accelerate the growth of some branches of the tree of life, but they cannot supplant the very evolution of the universe as a whole. In other words, while the human intellect is potentially universal, its activity is intermittent, partial, and concrete. My previous reflections are pertinent to correctly think about the relationships between artificial intelligence and humans within the general evolutionary framework. Artificial devices, originated by human intelligence and reason, do not seem to overcome their creators' limitations. In particular, as a realization of the exercise of human reason, AI will always be particularized and optimized for specific tasks and purposes. The human bias in AI is indelible. Each of AI's achievements leads directly to the inference of an intelligent design and a designer, written with small letters. Gonzalo Génova, who is a well-known Spanish scholar, insists on a simple definition that bears on artificial intelligence. Machines are defined by their purposes. Their goals are always particular, imposed by human programmers to solve concrete problems. Now, this leads us directly to reflect on the appearance of ends in nature. What is an end? How should one define ends? Are ends merely epistemic, or do they possess some ontological entity? The question I want to raise here is not simply the appearance of teleology in nature. That is a highly controversial question in the current philosophy of science. The question is whether one is entitled to think about the AI program in the following framework. Regardless of our metaphysical positions concerning teleology, human beings, as a fruit of natural evolution, experience themselves with purposes. Wouldn't it be reasonable to expect that for AI devices subjected to similar evolutionary mechanisms, other ends, perhaps different from those designed by human creators, can emerge? One of the most promising fields in this regard is algorithmic evolution. A simple machine can be identified with the execution of a certain algorithm to obtain some result. But if we keep the outcome undefined and allow the algorithm to modify itself more or less randomly, so that outputs that the machine itself imposes when interacting with the rest of the universe are optimized, wouldn't we be on the right track to achieve something very close to human intelligence or even superintelligence? In my view, and I'm approaching the gist of my argument, the problem with this way of arguing is that it asks for an explanatory power to evolution that the evolutionary theoretical framework does not possess. Trusting for an indefinite time the appearance of a novelty similar or superior to human intelligence is neither scientific nor honest. It means to carry out a vague extrapolation inspired by the general similarities that all processes have with evolution, obviously, but forgetting relevant and decisive differences. If I may digress, using as an excuse having all the time in the world available implies, on the one hand, falling into the mistake that the physicist Lord Kelvin criticized in the 19th century to the first evolutionists. And on the other hand, forgetting that there is also mathematics of transfinite numbers that permit the comparison between different types of infinities. Not everything is valid or possible, even if eventually an infinite or at least indefinite time were available. What would the supposed appearance of new ends in machines that can evolve be like? This question leads us to ask, as I have already pointed out, about the emergence of ends in the evolution of the universe. Now, it should be made clear that although the evolutionary framework is the only contemporary rational framework from which we can develop a comprehensive view of the history of the cosmos, we do not understand in detail how evolution works. For this reason, for example, we speak of random genetic variations as a source of novelty in phenotypes, in the sense that we cannot establish a priori correlations between said variations and their subsequent manifestations, successful or not, in the struggle for survival. It is natural selection that settles them, always a posteriori. The subtle issue is that the reference to randomness in scientific activity is always contextual, referring to relationships between concrete degrees of freedom, and to that extent, epistemic, not ontological. Furthermore, if we apply the results of Grigory Chaitin, an Argentinian-American mathematician, on the randomness of sequences of numbers, we realize that the randomness of the variations that feed evolution cannot be established in general algorithmically. In particular, this result assumes that evolution is not an algorithmic process, algorithmically reproducible. The variations that appear in our universe represent true novelties that introduce new degrees of freedom in nature. For this reason, we should refrain from making pseudo-prophetic scientific predictions about the future of evolution and natural determination. Fully understanding evolution is simply beyond the capabilities of human intelligence. But, in addition, resorting to evolution as a warrant that allegedly guarantees the appearance of a general and superior intelligence through the AI program means cheating in the discussion. Letting machines evolve implies subtracting them from the evolutionary flow and introducing them back into it. It involves returning what is artificial to what is natural. Granted the argumentative trap, someone might still object that proper ends could still appear for natural, no longer artificial machines through evolution. We would be dealing here not so much with a prophecy, but with just a logical possibility. For this reason, since the artificial intelligence program maintains the human beings as a primary reference, I would like to stop and reflect on the ends of man, not of nature, in this last part of my talk. What is a human end? What does it mean to specify an end? If one means just surviving, either as a species or as an individual, well, bacteria, cockroaches, or even black holes seem to fare better than us. It looks like an easy task for humans to specify particular ends in their lives. But we quickly experience that those concrete ends need to be framed or concatenated into ulterior ones that expand each personal biography. My point here is that it remains impossible to establish in a specific way a priori what the end of a human being is. Because of freedom made possible by material knowledge, human beings possess an unlimited capacity for growth. One way of describing this growth is considering the human aptitude to establish new ends that assume and integrate previous ones, and in turn can be again integrated into future ones. Now, such a process radically implies the existence of personal creativity based on freedom and knowledge. Can we somehow manage to program such creativity into AI? Is it enough to allow machines to modify themselves at different levels of operation and trust evolution to do the rest? Concatenating and integrating new ends in each personal biography, according to various levels of hierarchical subordination and in a limitless way, is a degree of biological complexity that has appeared in nature with humans. The human being sometimes suffers it and always enjoys it, but he or she cannot program such complexity in the machines. As writer Sean Raviv acknowledges in his article on neuroscientist Carl Friston, quote, "In the real world, most situations are not organized around a single, narrowly defined goal. Sometimes you have to stop playing breakout to go to the bathroom, put out a fire, or talk to your boss. And most environments are not as stable and rule-bound as a game is. The hubris, pride, behind neural networks is that they are supposed to think like us, but reinforcement learning doesn't get us really there. Now, the human task of concatenating ends in an unrestricted way reminds us that human beings are not, at their bottom, problem solvers, a definition that does suit machines and AI. Human beings are beings who pose problems because of their open and creative nature, called to a kind of completion that may initially be blurry, but may become more transparent along the way. The artificial intelligence program could only be feasible if the machines achieve true creativity. But humans only manage to introduce into machines a pseudo-creativity mediated by randomness in the variations, contextualized in a range of possibilities for the sake of achieving a specific end. In human beings, however, this contextuality of the ends is learned with life as it unfolds, and thanks to their capacity for abstraction, judgment, and integration of immaterial knowledge and personal decisions that freedom makes possible. In beings, context appear with novelty as the fruit of originality, especially the innovation of proposing new ends. Hence, it seems an impossible pretense within the artificial intelligence program to define or target all those contexts, most of them still non-existent. Whereas thanks to the immateriality of intellectual knowledge, human beings adapt the environment to themselves, artificial devices need their environment to be adapted to them, making it AI-friendly. I think these are Luciano Floridi's words. The artificial devices, need an artificial envelopment, an artificial niche that, among other things, selectively and partially translates the raw material of an analogical world into a digital language. It's a big issue, of course. In my conclusions, I'll return to the thread that unites machines with the artificial world, defining them through specific purposes. As every good engineer knows, there is nothing more dangerous than an uncontrolled machine, providing novelties, neither demanded nor wanted, outside its operating range. If there are authentic, unpredictable novelties in nature, well, we can let the machines participate in them. The price to be paid is that artificial intelligence loses then the specificity of its qualifier, namely, being produced to improve punctually or contextually, according to human standards, the results of biological evolution. In short, we cannot artificially program the non-specificity of natural intelligence. We cannot program evolution, but we can design devices to solve concrete tasks in keeping with particular purposes. However, letting such devices in the mystery of evolution without further qualification is reckless, to say the least, as the outcome remains beyond our intellectual reach. But there's good news. It is not a failure of the human species that the AI program can only end up being specific, but a reminder of our limits as creatures and why we need to be grateful for everything that has been gifted to us. So thank you ever so much for your attention. I will stop here and maybe we have some time for questions.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I was curious. It seems like AI is not the only human endeavor that doesn't act in accordance or perhaps against evolution. Human culture can too, right? Human culture can somehow act at odds with evolution. So in terms of human ends, culture can move us closer to our proper ends, or I think like the example you gave with AI, where you have robots being with elderly people in homes. I think that hurts the elderly person as much as it hurts the community. Community stability is based on things like empathy, compassion, and whatnot. So if culture can help us get to the ends or moves away from the ends, and maybe not making AI unique in that sense, then perhaps the discussion is, or the problem is not the AI, but the lack of discussion about how to use it and what our proper ends are. Wonder if you have any comments on that, if you agree, disagree, or...
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about some idea by former Pope Benedict XVI. I think in Introduction to Christianity, he explains that evolution, at the last part of it, should include somehow freedom and human decision. So, of course, we are part of evolution. In a sense, cultural evolution is also part of evolution. Now, the point is that with artificial intelligence, we are confronted with the big question of what does it mean to be human? So artificial machines can help us know better what are our ends. So what are we looking for in our cultural evolution? And of course, you always have this ambiguity in the ends of human beings. So we can't destroy ourselves. So I think that it was yesterday's talk by Simon Conway Morris. He presented the possibility of self-destructive civilization. Yeah, that's true. But so evolution in itself allows for the appearance of true freedom, of this takeoff of immateriality, and and this directionality that is driven by human freedom. So I think I have mentioned the idea of regaining the value of nature. So how should we understand ourselves as guardians and cultivators of nature? So how the human being is the cultivator, the guardian of creation, and I would like to link this idea with I think it's St. Paul in Romans 8:23-28 when he speaks about this nature expecting the final the redemption by the sons of God. So these are mysterious words, but I think that we are for sure part of evolution, but we need to understand ourselves better, and artificial intelligence may be an opportunity for that. It's well, I would like to point out that.
Any more questions from this side of the audience? Okay.
So earlier in your talk, I think I heard you say, fully understanding evolution is beyond the capabilities of human intelligence. And if I misquoted you, I apologize, but I wondered if you would elaborate on that. I didn't understand if that was a general statement about science in the sense that we can never fully understand, I mean, even the motions of subatomic particles, because those are governed by the uncertainty principle. We can't fully understand their motion, or was this a special kind of problem for for evolution?
Thanks a lot for that question. You didn't misquote me, so you understood my argument perfectly. I think, are you Jonathan Lunin? Maybe you are. Hi. So yeah, well, what I'm saying it's ultimately linked to the question of quantum mechanics and indetermination, ontological indetermination in nature. My point is that when we refer to random mutations, so it seems, I mean, mutations are actually the motor of evolution. So we have variation, we have novelty because of these mutations, at least at the biological level. But this must be allowed somehow in the universe. So in other words, what I'm trying to convey is the idea that the universe is not self-determined from the very beginning. So we have this opportunity, this space for the appearance of new degrees of freedom. In that sense, it is what I mean by fully understanding evolution. So I don't think that we can develop a theory of everything understood as a final theory from which everything can be deduced. So we always need to deal with parts of nature, and somehow the connection between these parts of nature, as shown by different scientific disciplines, is a bit patchy, it's not perfect. So I think that a full comprehension of the universe, it's impossible because we are part of the universe. So we always have this ant's eye view. We cannot achieve the God's eye view, so to speak. So I just want, and I think in my view, this randomness of mutation that maybe ultimately stem from randomness of nature itself, this ontological randomness of nature, it could be a very good sign that there are things that are beyond our capabilities, at least of scientific knowledge. So we always need to start from some presuppositions and from specific systems, not the whole universe.
Any more? Do we have time for one more question, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll ask one. Hello, Father Javier.
Hi,
This is
Steve.
Steve Barr. What would you mentioned the fact that humans, can choose different ends and different whereas machines are given a specific purpose by the human creators of them. What would you say about the traditional sort of Aristotelian and Thomistic ideas of man's natural and supernatural end? How does that fit into what you're saying?
I would like to make two clarifications. I think, I'm not sure now, but I think that current theology speaks of a single end, and so there's no such a thing as a natural end of man. So in this sense, precisely, there's a single, a unique end of man. But when we speak about a supernatural end, I think this is like a label that has to be specified. We need some concretion for that. So what does it mean for specific human beings? And this is my point. We don't know exactly what's the supernatural end. Of course, we can describe it as being in communion with God, being in paradise, being in heaven. But maybe you remember in the encyclical Spe Salvi, there's a nice discussion, and I'm quoting St. Augustine, a letter to Proba, I think, where we find this problem of what do we really expect? What is the supernatural or the unique end of our lives? And we know and we don't know. So there's always this sort of being in the dark, but also with some light. So my point is that each human being, thanks to his or her own biographical life, his or her biography, gets to know what was the specific end. I mean, what was the goal that God has thought for him or her during this life on Earth. So it's a problem of being more specific. If we want to be specific, we need to live for that. It's impossible to do it from scratch.
Let's thank our speaker again.